So I just want to remind people that, genius is not so much born, it's really built, and I know this because I grew up with severe learning challenges. I had three traumatic brain injuries before the age of 12. I couldn't read for 3 years. I was labeled, the boy with the broken brain. So I had all these processing issues and, self-doubt and lack of confidence and, all of that. So if people are struggling right now, we want to offer you not only hope, but real help.
Yeah, well, this actually, I'm very excited about today's episode because Jim Kwik is on. And if you guys don't know who Jim Kwik is, he is the best in the world for brain training. And I've been following your work for many years. Your book, Limitless, is now out as an expanded edition. So there's more information, basically.
Yeah. It's dense.
It's very dense. And what I love about you, Jim, and I was just telling you this before we started rolling, is that you're so good at giving actionable things where people can actually integrate right now into their lives to,
Thank you.
You're welcome, for their memory, for their concentration, just reading. I mean, I can listen to your stuff and read your stuff for hours.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. And that's why this is one podcast, and I'm not just saying this, and I don't tell this to anybody. I've been heavily anticipating this episode to meet you. So thank you for being on here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you to everyone who's joining us and listening.
I don't even know where to begin, except, of course you always use yourself as an example, right? Because, everything that you talk about, I feel you could be so helpful in every way person's life, right? Like business, personal. Well, I want to start with just overall, just the idea of limitless, right? Because, I know you're about mindset and all that. What does it mean to you to be limitless? And what's the difference between being delusional that you can do something and actually being able to do something?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Limitless is not about being perfect. It's really about advancing and progressing beyond what you believe is possible. And part of it is a mindset. Part of it has to do with motivation. Part of it has to do with the methods that we're using to get us to where we want to go. You talk a lot about mindset. I enjoy your work. We got to share a stage recently, and
last weekend.
Yeah, and I saw your TEDx talk a little while ago, and mindset. Overcoming self-doubt. I think people grossly underestimate what they're capable of because of the things that you've addressed. Fear, and it's important to be courageous. And you don't even. And it was interesting in your TEDx talk. You talk about the 10% and doing doing things at least 10 times.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. And I want to just acknowledge that because when it comes to podcasts, even I have a podcast, you have a podcast. There are somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 million podcasts, but most people, if you get to 10 episodes, then you're amongst only 3% of that 4 million. So it's not hard to win nowadays, just showing up for yourself and showing up for others.
Absolutely. I can't believe you actually watched it. Thank you. And because thank you, I appreciate that. But I believe, I'm a big believer in that because I think we are our own worst enemies and we limit ourselves because we feel we can't do something, and therefore if you think you can or can't, that's the answer.
Yeah.
And what do you, how in your mind, in your work, how do you give people techniques and strategies to overcome their own limited minds?
Yeah. So there's 3 limits. If people feel stuck in some area of their life, maybe financially or their impact or their health or relationships, whatever, maybe their reading speed or their memory, there are 3 forces that keep you in that box, right? That box that you feel stuck in is 3-dimensional. So 3 forces that contain you are what I call your limitless model. It's your mindset, your motivation, the methods. And when we go through it, even at the event we were at together, there was somebody came to me and said, Jim, I'm glad, you're here talking about memory and focus. I just feel like I'm getting too old. I'm just really not that smart. I have a horrible memory. And I always say, stop. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them, right? And if you fight for your limitations, they're yours. And so many people are quick to have those stories that you talk about that keep them stuck. This is not possible for me. And so mindset is really the set of assumptions and attitudes you have about something. What are people listening? What are your set of assumptions and attitudes towards money? Because you can learn a great method on how to build a business how to make money. But if your mindset is, I don't deserve it, or I'm not capable of it, or that's for somebody else, we're still going to be stuck in that box.
Yeah.
Because your brain is this incredible supercomputer, and your self-talk is a program it will run. So if you tell yourself, I'm not good at, I don't know, remembering people's names.
Yeah.
You won't remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to. So part of a transformation is you just want to be conscious and self-aware that, let's say, to make a change, you need to be aware that, where you are right now. So I would say, even adding like a little word like yet at the end, I don't have a great memory yet, just opens up more possibility, for that to happen. But there are a lot of lies we buy into that somehow, when people see me at events that we're at, I'll do these demonstrations if there's time, and I'll memorize 100 people's names. I'll have them stand up and pass around a microphone, and or they'll challenge me to remember words or numbers, and I'll do it. But I always tell people I don't do this to impress you. I do this to really express to you what's possible, because the truth is, and this is going to be hard to accept and swallow for some people, regardless of your age, your background, your career, education level, financial situation, gender, history, IQ, we all could do this for the most part. We're just not taught. And there are no classes that taught you how to focus or how to read faster or how to improve your memory or the kind of things we focus on.
Right.
So I just want to remind people that, genius is not so much born, it's really built. And I know this because I grew up with severe learning challenges. I had 3 traumatic brain injuries before the age of 12. I couldn't read for 3 years. I was labeled, the boy with the broken brain. So I had all these processing issues and, self-doubt and lack of confidence and, all of that. So if people are struggling right now, we want to offer you not only hope, but real help.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because like your story, your whole story of how you had the boy with the broken brain and all that you had such limits. I would imagine such limiting beliefs about yourself. And then how did it start for you? Like, how did you break through and even like the world? It's actually kind of like tell God what you want to do. They'll laugh because now you're on this. Now you're basically teaching people how to learn for a living at the highest level. How were you able to overcome your limiting belief that you were not dumb, that you can do it? Like, what was the first step for you? Like, how did you even become who you became?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't usually talk about this, but so I struggled all through school, all through elementary school, middle school, junior high, high school. I would work 3 times harder as everybody else, but I would still, barely pass, if I was lucky. I was almost failed, high school English and all these challenges. And it was tough. When I graduated high school, I was lucky to get into a local, state university. And I took all these classes, and I thought being a freshman meant you could make a fresh start. So I took all these classes, and I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to prove to myself, make my parents proud, prove to the world I could do it. But I did worse, and it was hard because I thought freshman meant I could make a fresh start, right? And I was like, I don't have the money to even be here. And so I was trying to figure out how to tell my family I was going to quit school, because I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, and I wanted to be a good role model, but I had all this pressure. And I just said, school's not for me. And a friend said, hey, before you decide, that's a big, life choice. Why don't you come home with me this weekend and just get some distance? I'm going to visit my family, that kind of thing. So I do, and the family's pretty well off. And the father walks me around his property, on the water, and just asks me a simple question, which is the worst question you could ask me at the time. He says, Jim, how's school? And I just I don't know what it was, but I start bawling in front of some complete stranger and telling him my whole broken brain story and how I'm not smart enough. I got to quit school. Don't know how to tell my parents because they worked so hard when they immigrated here, and I wanted to be a good role model. And he's like, Jim, well, why are you in school? What do you want to be, do, have, share? And I didn't have an answer because I just thought we're in school because we're supposed to go to school. And I go to answer him some of the things I'd like to do, and he says stop, and he pulls out a notebook out of his back pocket. He tears out a few sheets and makes me write down all my answers. Basically a list of things I wanted to achieve in life, dreams, those kind of things, like a bucket list. Mm-hmm. And when I'm done, I don't know how much time went by, I start folding the sheets to put in my pocket, and he rips them out of my hand, just rapidly, and he starts looking at them. And I'm an 18-year-old, very insecure kid, and this guy's obviously, pretty well off. And I'm freaking out because I've never shared these things with anybody, right? And when he's done, he's like, Jim, you are this close to everything on this list. I'm spreading my index fingers about a foot apart. And I was like, no way, give me 10 lifetimes, I'm not going to crack that list. And he takes his fingers and he puts them to the side of my head, meaning what's on the inside, my brain is like the key that's going to help me get everything I want. And he walks me into a room of his home that I'd never seen before. It is wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books. And I never finished a book cover to cover. And it's like being in a room full of snakes, because I'm like kind of like they make me very uneasy. And he starts grabbing these snakes and handing them to me, these books. And I started looking at the titles, and there are these biographies of some incredible women and men in history, and some very early personal growth books, like old school. And I'm dating myself. I'm in my 50s, so it's like, the power of positive thinking, Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, those kind of classic books. And he says, Jim, leaders or readers, you have to read one book a week. And I'm like, have you not heard all my story? I'm the horrible reader. I have all this schoolwork. When I said schoolwork, he was like, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education. And I didn't realize it was a Mark Twain quote. This is like over 30 years ago. And I was like, that's very inspiring, but I can't commit to doing this because, I'm going to be good to my word. I just can't. And very smart man, he reaches into his pocket and he takes out my dream list, my bucket list. And this is audacity. He starts reading every single thing that I wrote down out loud. And something, Jen, about hearing your goals or dreams that you've never really articulated, but you hear it in someone else's voice, kind of incanted out into the ether. It messed with my mind and my spirit, something fierce. And honestly, a lot of things on that list were things I wanted to do for my family, things they could never afford to do for themselves. And with that motivation of that purpose, I agree to read one book a week. So fast forward, I'm back at school and I have a pile of books for midterms that I have to read, and then a pile of books I promised to read that I want to read. And I couldn't even get through pile A. So what do? I don't have time, so I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't exercise, I don't go out with friends, I don't do anything but just, live in the library. And after a couple of months, I end up exhausted. I pass out at 2 a.m. in the morning. I fall down a flight of stairs in the library. I hit my head again, and I woke up in the hospital like almost 2 days later. And I was hooked up to all these IVs. I was very malnourished. I was down to like 117 pounds. Like I had lost all this weight. I was just like wasting away. And I thought I died. It was the darkest time in my life because I just felt like maybe I should have died because I just wasn't, And so like, yeah, that's why I talk a lot about mental health. But when I woke up, the nurse came in and brought me a mug of tea. And on it was a picture of Albert Einstein, right? The opposite of what I thought I was. But there was a quote on the mug, I'll always remember it. It said, the same level of thinking that has created your problem won't solve your problem. And it made me think, like, what's my problem? Well, I have a broken brain. I'm a very slow learner. I was like, well, how do I think differently about it? And I was thinking, well, maybe I could fix my brain. Maybe I could learn how to learn better. And I put my studies aside because I wasn't making any traction on that anyway. And I started studying these books and also studying this area of learning how to learn, an area of science called meta-learning. And more about brain health and speed reading, mnemonics. And about 60 days into it, a light switch flipped on, and I started to understand things for the first time. I started to have better focus, retain information, and my grades, they shot up. But not only that, but my life, every area of my life got better. And and with that confidence, I couldn't help but help other people. And because I feel a moral obligation to do what I do because shame on us if people are struggling the way we struggled, and we knew something that could help them and we didn't do that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, I started tutoring, and one of my very first students, she was a college freshman. She read 30 books in 30 days. Can you imagine that?
Fully?
Not skim or scan, but she read them. And I wanted to find out not how. I taught her how. I wanted to know why, because most people know what to do. A lot of listeners also, they know what to do. Many of your listeners have probably forgotten more about personal growth and business or like self-development, motivation, everything, mindset than most of their friends and family. But most people don't do what they know, right? And but she did, and I wanted to find out why. And I found out that her mother was dying of terminal cancer. The doctors were giving her mom just 60 days, about 2 months to live. and the books she was reading were books to save her mom's life. Yeah, I get choked up even thinking about it. So I wished her luck, prayers. 6 months goes by and I don't hear from her. And then one day I get a call and she's crying profusely, like hysterically. And when she stops, I find out they're tears of joy that her mother not only survived, but is really getting better. Doctors don't know how or why. The doctors were calling it a miracle, but her mother attributed 100% to the great advice she got from her daughter, who learned it from all these books. And in that moment, I realized that if knowledge is power, then learning really is our superpower. And it's a superpower we all have. We just weren't really taught how to do those things. So I've dedicated my life over the past 3 decades to getting this information out to the world.
So basically, obviously, there was a purpose behind what you were doing. And so that's how you started it. And then you kind of taught yourself how to learn. I mean, you read all these books on meta learning, and then you basically figured out your own process, so to speak, to do it.
Yeah, and I realized after doing this, and we have an online academy, and we have students in every country in the world, we get a lot of feedback, that it's not how smart you are, it's really how are you smart. You know, but there are no classes on focus or concentration or memory or any of these things.
There's not.
And now we live in a world where, I don't know, we have autonomous electric cars and spaceships that are headed to Mars, but our vehicle of choice when it comes to learning is often more like a horse and carriage, right? It hasn't changed as much as the world has changed. Yeah.
I mean, especially now, like, I feel like, and I know what you're going to say, like, I feel like my memory is so bad. And I know you're going to say, well, if you tell yourself that. But I also think it's because we've now been conditioned to have zero ability to focus and concentrate, because if you don't use it, you lose it, right? Like, if you give me your phone number, I'll put it in my phone. And then if I need to find you, I'll be like, okay, click, or directions. I'll go on MapQuest or Waze, click. Like, we're becoming lazy in our brain.
Yeah.
And so we're not using it as much. And therefore, I don't need to, it doesn't require me to remember things. So therefore, if I met somebody new, or social media, like, it's never like, everything is so quick. Right? That don't you feel like, how do we mitigate that? Because it's not going to get any better, right? It's just going to get worse. People are still, no one's leaving social media or throwing away their phone.
Right. And I love technology. I'm not anti-technology, but you're right. It does, if we're too reliant on it, it's very convenient, but it can be crippling. Just like if, you mentioned numbers, like, I don't want to memorize 500 phone numbers, but it should be concerning we've lost the ability to remember one.
That's right.
Or a PIN number, or a passcode, or a seed phrase, or a conversation we just had, or something we just read, or something we're going to say, or someone's name, or any of that, right? I believe 2 of the most costly words, I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs that subscribe to you, 2 of the most costly words sometimes in business are I forgot. I forgot to do it. I forgot to bring it. I forgot the meeting. I forgot that conversation. I forgot that name, all that. On the other side, though, memory can make someone a lot of money. Meaning if you could easily remember client information, product information, give speeches without notes, sales scripts on video, without a teleprompter or names and faces, all this stuff, then, you could write your own ticket. And everybody has that ability. But we don't exercise it, right? Because so what they call digital dementia, the high reliance on technology, it serves as an external memory device.
Right.
But then you're right, your brain is like a muscle. It's obviously an organ, but it's like a muscle. It's use it or lose it, as you said. But it's the equivalent of if I had to go, I don't know, 10 blocks and I end up driving instead of walking. Or if your office is on the 3rd or 4th floor, your apartment's there, and you end up taking the elevator each time instead of walking it.
Exactly.
You're not getting the fitness, and a lot of people are losing their mental fitness because they're not doing the work. And so again, it's a balance between convenience and having your own autonomy and power also as well. So I think using your memory when you can is a wonderful way. Just like when people get their steps in, right? It's just like, we're not doing the mental calisthenics, if you will. Right.
And so you touched upon something that I was going to ask you later on, but the fitness part, right?
Yeah.
I feel like if I don't work out, my brain won't work as well.
Right.
And I do think and you can tell me the connection between physical fitness and mental fitness.
Oh yeah.
Right. And that to me is like my number one tip for people who want to improve their their focus, their energy, their memory, work out.
Yeah.
Because if not, like I feel like you get such brain fog.
Yeah, it's a must, for everybody. As your body moves, your brain grooves.
Yeah.
Literally.
I love that.
Thank you.
You got a lot of these good sayings.
Yeah, I try to make them as memorable as possible.
Oh, I was going to say, you have a ton of them. You said something else, like, like a lot of it, but like you have a lot of these like things like that. The reader, leader, like
Right.
they're great.
The
I love
faster you
them.
can learn, the faster you can earn. Yeah, I feel like
Yes.
knowledge today is not only power, knowledge is profit. But exercise is one of the most important things you could do for your brain health. When you're moving, generally what's good for your heart is going to be good for your head.
Right.
So you're getting more blood flow. Like when we're sitting, blood is like kind of pooling into, our body and away from, our minds. But when your body moves, you make more connections. You create brain-derived neurotropic factors, BDNF,
Right.
which is like fertilizer for neuroplasticity, for new brain cell growth. It's so important for learning. It changes your mood, which could obviously it reduces stress, helps you sleep better, and all that has an impact
On your
on our
brain.
ability, our brain and our brain's ability to perform. We get blood flow, we get more oxygen to our brain. Our brain is only about 2% of our body mass, but it uses like 20% of the fuel. It's an energy hog. But working out is one of the most important things you can do for your brain.
For your brain. So give me a few tangible things we can, like, for
Yeah.
example, like you said, when you go into an audience, you can memorize 100 names and like
Yeah.
call back, like, okay, what's the process? How do you even
Yeah.
how do you do that?
So we talk about this in our podcast and in the book, but I'll give you a number of quick tips that people could go through. Let's say somebody's listening right now and they have trouble remembering names, but there was like a suitcase of $1 million cash. And I know you have people all over the world listening, so whatever the equal currency would be. If you just remember the name of the next stranger you meet today, who's going to remember that person's name? Everybody, right? So it had nothing to do with someone's capability. And so as a coach, I want to call people on their BS, their belief systems. It had nothing to do with their potential. It had everything to do whether or not they were motivated. So just first thing is just going back to this young lady who read 30 books in 30 days. You want to start with a reason first, because without a reason, you won't get the result. A lot of people don't have a reason to remember what they read. They don't have a reason to remember someone's name. Or if they do, they're not mindful of it. So even as simple, and this is so simple, overly simple that people won't do it, but even asking yourself, why do I want to remember what I'm listening to from this lecturer, or what I'm reading, or in this podcast? How can I use this? Or even remembering someone's name. Maybe you're doing it to show the person respect, make a new friend, get a referral, make a sale, practice these things that they learn on this podcast. But if you come up with a couple of reasons, you're more likely to get the result, right? Because your brain it has to go from your head to your heart to your hands. Because someone could visualize things and set goals and KPIs in their head, but if they're not acting with their hands, usually the thing that's missing is their heart, their emotions, right? And emotions, because we're not logical, we're more biological. You think about dopamine and oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, we're this chemical feeling soup. And one of the best ways of changing our feelings is to change the questions that we're asking, because it shines a spotlight on something that could be more important. And so, the first step I would say, I always tell people, remember MOM, M-O-M. M is motivation. The O is observation, which is interesting because a lot of people aren't forgetting the name. They're just not hearing the name. Why? Because they're usually talking to themselves. They're thinking about how they're going to respond. And you can't listen to yourself and listen to somebody else. So, even if and I encourage everyone to take notes, because I think we're going to end up turning this into a big master class. If you were to write down or type the word listen and then scramble the letters, it spells another word perfectly. It's a little like brain exercise. It spells the word silent, right? And it's so, and it's just being silent and present. I remember years ago, I was a fundraiser, and I got sat at a table, and I was the first one there. And after I sat down, I like to be on time, so I sat down, and then Forrest Whitaker sat next to me, and then Richard Branson sat next to him, and then Ashton Kutcher, his twin brother, which I didn't know he had a twin brother.
He's a twin brother?
Yeah. And
does he look as cute as him?
They look different. They're, I think, fraternal twins. Oh. And then President Clinton sat next to me. And this is not a political thing, but he remembered my name. And I was like, okay, he knew who was sitting here. Because I had met him a few years earlier, very, very briefly. And okay, and then he picks up the conversation we had a few years ago, and nobody was privy to that. And I was like, okay, no one's feeding him that information. And I was like, I need to know, I'm a memory guy. I need to know how you're doing this. And he was telling me the story about his grandfather in Arkansas, in the living room would tell stories to the kids. And what was different is he would quiz each of the kids to see if they were paying attention. And when he's explaining this to me at a meta level, I was realizing when he was telling it to me, I felt like I was like the only one in this room. I was in a ballroom with a couple thousand people. And you ever meet somebody that they're so like there with you?
Totally.
As opposed to, I'm going to call some people out who are listening, you're looking over someone's shoulder, especially here in LA. Sometimes you're like, who else is in the room? And more important, or maybe we're guilty of that sometimes also. But so I was noticing that regardless of politics, people would say Clinton is a charisma, he's a connector, he's a great a wonderful communicator, and he's got a powerful presence. And I think his incredible memory and his powerful presence comes from being powerfully present with people. And who could do that? We all could do that.
That's 100% true.
We could do that with our kids. We could do that with our team. We could do that with our clients also as well. And so the O in mom, the M is motivation, the O is observation, just really paying attention and being silent and listening. And then the last M in mom are the methods. Like a simple thing like suave. I always tell people when they're out and they're out there, I think one of the most important business etiquette skills is their ability to remember names. Because how are you going to show somebody you care for their health, their business, their finances, their family, whatever it is you have to offer, if you don't care enough just to remember like them,
Totally.
Because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, as the adage goes. And I would say, when you're checking yourself in the mirror before you go out to an event, just say, I'm going to be suave. This S in suave is I like to say someone's name when I meet them, right? Ed, it's nice to meet you, right? And I repeat it because I get to hear it twice, once from him and then once from me. And then also it's good that if I want to be corrected, I want to be corrected up front. Because sometimes when you're at an event, it's noisy, and I don't want to have a conversation with Ed over there, recording, and say goodbye, Ted. Right. So I'll say, Ed, it's nice to meet you. So I get to hear it again. The U in suave is I just use it, but I don't abuse it. Ed, it's really nice to meet you. Ed, what are we doing today? Ed, where should I sit? Ed, that would be an abuse, right? But using it 2 or 3 times in the conversation, that works for you. It's kind of like this is like a Seinfeld episode or something. You have like the episode where you're the close talker, or the one, he was dating somebody and he was intimate with her and forgot her name.
I remember that. That was hilarious.
And it rhymed with a part of the female anatomy or something
genitalia,
like that.
Yeah, I remember that one.
But it's one of those things, and then they would do all these like hacks, and George would come by and he would introduce himself trying to get it, or he would try to go into her, her purse to get a, ID
license,
or license, something like that. But this is something because Seinfeld's about everyday situations, and this is an everyday situation for most people. But I use it 2 or 3 times in the conversation. The A is you ask about a person's name, because that's everyone's favorite subject is themselves, right? And I would say that this works especially well for names that we haven't heard before. If you meet someone named Ramit or Afzal or Ridiger or Nankita. I was doing a training for a big insurance company. And it was a couple hundred people, and the training director's name was Nankita. And I was like, wow, that's a beautiful name. And I was like, where's it from? How do you spell it? And I said, what does it mean? And she paused and she looked at her coworkers. I was like, what does it mean? She said, it means graceful falling waters. And I was like, wow, that's beautiful. It puts an image in my mind. And then based on the audience reaction, I was like, how long have you worked here? She was like 6, 7 years. Do you know a lot of people in the room? She was like, yeah, a lot of them were at my wedding. He was like, and I said, I addressed the room. I was like, how many of you knew that's what her name meant? And out of a couple hundred people, how many people raised their hand? Not one. And remember, a name is the sweetest sound to a person's ear. So ask about a name. How do you spell it? Where are you from? Who you were named after? Are you related to this person? It's so wonderful to get, kind of closer to somebody's name. Remember, think about the emotion that's behind a name. It's probably one of the first words you heard. It's probably one of the first words you learned how to write, and you're given all this love and support. So that's kind of anchored there. So a name is really special. And then finally, the V and the E in suave. The V is a fun one. I visualize people's names. So the idea here is make a mental picture of the name, something that sounds like it or reminds you of it, because most of us think very visually, because our visual cortex takes up the most real estate in our brain. And just like how most people are better with faces than names, right?
Totally.
You go to someone and say, I remember your face, but I forgot your name. You never go to someone and say the opposite. You never go, I remember your name, but I forgot your face, right?
Of course it is.
But there's a Chinese proverb that says, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. And what I do, I understand. What I hear, I forget. I heard the name, I forgot it.
Yeah.
What I see, I saw the face, I remember it. And what I do, going back to the power of practice, I understand better. And so visualize, if you tend to remember what you see, then try seeing what you want to remember. So if a person's name is Mary, for a split second, I'll imagine, she's getting married, or she's carrying 2 lambs, like Mary had a little lamb.
Yeah.
And it's so silly, and childish, but children tend to be the fastest learners.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're just playful. You're not sharing this with Mary, right? But if a person's name is Carol, I just imagine for a split second, she's Christmas caroling. And then when I say goodbye, when I leave that event, I'll see her Christmas caroling in my mind, and I'll say goodbye, Carol. Right? And because some people do this naturally, if you forget someone's name, a lot of people I find start going through the alphabet. Does it start with an A? Does it start with a B? Does it start with a C? And they get very worried when they get to like W, because there's not many letters left. But sometimes it's like D. Oh, it's David, right? Because and if a letter could spark that, a picture definitely could. So if some person's name is Mike, I would imagine them on this microphone singing karaoke.
So you visualize a lot of it. And then the other thing I think that you kind of touched upon it, then there's this whole idea of multitasking, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, multitasking is like the devil, because then you don't remember, you don't recall, really you're not paying attention.
Yeah, I find that when people are trying to do that, by the way, because I know people are going to comment on this, the E is end.
Oh, yeah, end. Okay,
end
sorry.
No, that's great, because I was testing everybody also. But just end the conversation saying their name. So it's so simple.
Like, nice to meet you, Jim.
Right, perfect.
Yeah.
It was a real pleasure, Jennifer.
Yeah.
And so, but when it comes to multitasking, a big part of it is like lack of focus. When people try to multitask, they think that they're gaining time. But research shows you're actually losing time, because it could take anywhere from 5 or 10 minutes to regain your focus,
Totally.
Get into that flow. But not only that, but it also costs us mistakes. It's well known that a lot of surgeons, when they're trying to multitask during surgery, doing an operation, if they try to multitask, they're going to make more surgical errors. And it's equivalent of like texting driving.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Like it's
exactly.
like, it's splitting your focus. You can't do either thing very well. And then finally, the reason you don't multitask, not does it cost you time and mistakes, it costs us energy. Like when you're focused on an activity or writing a report or whatever, and then you jump to email, you're lighting up a different cognitive web. So you have to, it takes a lot of brain glucose to kind of task switch back and forth. And so we're burning that energy, and people wonder why they feel like spent, or they're suffering from brain fog or just mental fatigue.
So is that why also, that's so interesting, because like I'm like, as a mom of 2 as well, and I work a lot, I feel like that's the problem, right? Like I feel like my memory probably has diminished because of that whole multitask. It's not that my memory necessarily has, but because of all the things we've talked about. But plus, I'm constantly multitasking, so I'm not paying attention to one specific thing.
Yeah.
So the words "I forgot" happen a lot, like, "Oh, I forgot to pack you this," or "I forgot to pick you up at practice."
Right.
A friend said that to me.
Okay.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a very helpful tool, I think, for moms as well, because that what do you do though when life happens, right?
Yeah.
Because life is gonna take
absolutely,
and take hold of this, right? And there sometimes doesn't feel like there's enough time in a day to be able to do everything. And so because of the lack of ability to focus, we don't focus. So,
and that's the other one. Like we talk about digital dementia, there's also digital distraction. Like when we were growing up, we didn't have cell phones and social media and everything else like that. But every like, share, comment, cat video, ring, ping, ding, all of that, it's just driving us to distraction. And part of it is, we're flexing those distraction muscles so much throughout the day. We wonder why we can't focus in a conversation, or when we're on a Zoom, or when we're with, the kids or something like that. So I would say that you don't have focus, you do it. And so a big principle in Limitless is taking the nouns in our life and turning them into verbs. meaning you don't have motivation, there's a process for motivating yourself. You don't have energy, there's a process for generating energy. You don't have a memory, there's this 3-step process for remembering things. And there's also a process for focusing. And so just realize that when it comes to focus, a big part of it, of course, there's life conditions, right? And nobody has total focus, and nor would I think I want that all the time.
Right.
So laser focus, I'm not paying attention to everything else. But we always have to kind of like, just like with our vision, we have this foveal vision and we have this kind of perception, like peripheral vision that we could take in more also as well. So it helps to be able to kind of fluctuate between both, to be able to see something very specific, micro, and then expand macro in our life also. When I would say focus for me is really about filtering. It's about not so much time management. I know we only have a certain amount of time in a day, 24 hours. That's the only thing that's equal from anyone watching here. Not everybody has an equal income or equal contacts or equal education, but we all have, 86,400 seconds in a day. And what I would say is, for me, it's about not time management, but priority management. Meaning the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing. And so we've heard that phrase, you don't want to major in minor things, but a lot of people get distracted because they're focusing on things that just don't matter very much, and so what I would say is, for me, even I work off a to-do list. And also what I'll do is, like, when I wake up in the morning, the number one thing that most people do is they grab their device. And, I have a video on Facebook that has like 37 million views just saying don't touch your phone for at least 30 minutes, right? And it's not easy. I'm not suggesting it's easy.
Right.
But like, if the first thing you do when you wake up, you're incredibly relaxed, right? You're very susceptible and to suggestible to things in the environment. And if the first thing you do is pick up your device, the human brain wasn't meant to kind of context switch between thousands of different pieces of data.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. And so you're rewiring your brain to be distracted, and you wonder why you can't focus later that day.
Right.
The other thing you're rewiring your brain to do if you pick up your phone first thing in the morning, not only for distraction, but reaction. Meaning that, I don't know if you've ever woke up, checked the messages, and you get one social media message, a voicemail message, text, email, whatever, and it hijacks your mood for like hours.
Right.
And it puts you on the defense. And someone who's an entrepreneur, they're a high achiever, you're never going to have a quality life if you're just reacting to things.
Right.
Everyone knows they should be more proactive. And so what I do instead of touching my phone is I'll lie in bed and I'll do this quick thought experiment. I've been doing this for years. I'll say, okay, let's say I come home tonight and somebody asks me, my wife asked me like how my day was. I'll say like, it was really good. I think it was a great day. We crushed it. And then I'll say, what had to happen in order for me to feel that way or to say those things? And I'll really narrow it down to 3 things personally and 3 things professionally. That's my personal, people don't have to follow this, but to understand the first principle behind it. And they don't have to be big things. Like on my personal list could be just like, taking our baby out or in the dogs for a walk. That could be one of those things. But it forces me to kind of look at, my friend Clay Bear has this kind of champagne moment idea where in sports, when it's time to celebrate and open up the champagne, but we don't have that usually for our days.
Right.
Right. And you're never going to get through a list of hundreds of things that you need to do on your to-dos. So what I would think is what helps me to focus, yes, you have a to-do list, but have a not to-do list. Great, and I mentioned a lot of books because, you read to succeed. But my thing, there's a great book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. When you say yes to good, make sure you're not saying no to, great. And sometimes we do that. When we say yes to somebody or something, we're saying no to ourselves. So sometimes being limitless is putting borders and boundaries around the things that we treasure, our time, our emotions, our life. And having a not to do list I think is as important as knowing what to do, is knowing what not to do. That could distract your focus.
It's really interesting because the not to do list that you're saying becomes much more important as you get busier and busier in life, right?
Because someone like yourself and some of the people that listen, you have more opportunities, right?
And
so
look at you.
And you have opportunity stress, right? So more and more opportunities.
Oh, yes.
And, saying yes to that, it's like having too many tabs open on your computer and it eventually crashes or it slows down or it burns out.
Totally. That was what I was going to ask you because I feel, and that's the other thing, right? Because when you waited so long for these opportunities to come to come around, and then when they do, you say yes to all of them, or
things that you would have prayed for, like, years ago.
100%, right? And so then the anxiety kicks in, like, oh my God, I can't say
fear
no.
of missing out.
Fear of missing out, or like, so it won't happen again. Like, look at your life, right? Like, you were this, the boy with the broken brain. You exceed your own wildest dreams of what your success is. You said you're in 195 countries teaching all these things. You're one of the top speakers in the world. Every company wants to talk to you. Every celebrity you train. You are being pulled in so many directions. How do you stay mentally focused and astute, and how do you control your situation? Because you're just getting started. I mean, now you have a baby. You said, how old is your baby?
Just turned 9 months.
Okay, so this is that's hard. So now you're you're feeling my pain. Now you're a parent and you are doing this. How do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's so we talked about mindset, our self-beliefs and what we believe is possible and we deserve. The other part, the second M in Limitless, is motivation. And for me, motivation is not something that's abstract. It's something very specific. The formula that we share it's P times E times S3. P times E times S3. So the first thing, let's take an example of being motivated to exercise, right? Mm-hmm. Great for your brain. And if that's not something people normally do, they need the first P, which is purpose, right? Yeah. We always talk about the reasons, like this young lady read 30 books and she had very clear purpose that she felt. Because a lot of people here could write down the reasons why, but it stays up here. But unless they feel it, they're not going to do something about it. So I would say first, feel the purpose. And for me, a lot of stuff I do is, for my family and for the impact. So I'm always dialed in to right now, who's counting on you to be at your best today, right? For me, that's very motivating, mm-hmm. right? But for some people, it might not be. So I would say that purpose comes from your values. And so ask yourself, what's most important to you in life? What's most important to you in a relationship? What's most important to you in your career, right? And then stack a hierarchy and really tag that activity towards the things that are most important. And if you can't tag it, maybe what you're doing is not that important, right? And so I would say first, find purpose. The E in this equation is energy, right? Somebody could have a lot of purpose because they want to make a difference or they want to get in shape, but they don't do it because they have no energy. They had a big processed meal, they're in a food coma, so they're not going to read that day or study that day to be an expert, right? They have a newborn, they haven't slept in 3 weeks, and so they're not going to be very motivated to exercise, right? Or to make that hard call, or or go on stage or whatever. So that's why we talk so much about brain energy, like the best brain foods, how to optimize your sleep, manage your stress, all those things. And then finally, you can have limitless purpose and limitless energy. And I do a lot of things to maintain my energy personally, because I could be on 3 continents in a week. That's very
common.
Unfortunately.
Really?
And so with sleep and jet lag and, time zones and all of that, waking up in foreign environments, that's not your own sleep sanctuary kind of thing. But then you could have limitless energy, but then you'd still not be motivated because you need S3. And this is something that's not usually addressed. Sometimes people's goals that they're shooting for are too abstract or too big. Mm-hmm. They want that perfect body, right? Or they want to make that next unicorn, or they want to have 100,000 followers, or whatever it happens to be. Sometimes we need S3, small, simple steps. Mm-hmm. Because what will keep people unmotivated and procrastinate is being intimidated by something or being confused, right? And a confused mind doesn't do anything, right? So let's say it happens to be to work out. For somebody, that's a big jump because they don't work out regularly. A small, simple step is like putting on your running shoes or making it to the gym. That would be like a small, simple step.
Right.
Your kids aren't flossing their teeth. I did an episode with a biological dentist recently talking about oral health for brain health. And if your kids aren't doing it, get them to floss one tooth because that's a small, simple step. And they're not going to stop at one tooth, right? Get them to throw one sock in the hamper to clean their room. So little by little becomes a lot. And the question everyone should write down to find their S3, what is the tiniest action I could take right now that will give me progress towards this goal where I can't fail? What is the tiniest action I could take right now that will give me progress towards this goal, closer to that goal, where I can't fail? And then you find your S3. So maybe, if people have seen me with Oprah or Elon or these people, we bonded over books because reading is so important. Somebody has decades of experience like yourself, and you put it into a book, which you did, and somebody sit down in a few days and read that book, they could download decades in a days. That's it. That's the biggest advantage there is, But if people aren't reading every day, because most people don't, maybe a small simple step is reading one line, right? And then inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's just way too hard.
You're so this is how you remember everything. You create these like these rhymes,
and it's how I remember it, but it's also how everybody. Like more importantly, it's how our listeners will remember it.
But it works. Like when I was like listening to like a bunch of the stuff that when you were coming on to the pot, when I knew you were coming on and I was doing my research on you and blah, 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 you did that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's so clever because it's like, it does stick in your head. Like readers, leaders, cinch, all these things. And it does like, it does kind of like click your brain into memory. Now, this is the other thing, right? Okay, that's one thing to read because with this podcast, I'm sure, I think a lot of people who have podcasts, if they do the research, if they're like good at their job, let's say, they have to read a lot of books, right? Now it comes down to retention, because I can read 50, but I can not 50, but like there's been weeks I've got to read like 6 books, right? But once that person's on my podcast or once I'm finished the book in 2 days, I don't remember anything.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'll remember a nugget of information, but the retention is terrible.
Yeah, and it's tough. They call it the forgetting curve. It's similar back in school. Sometimes we don't study every day, but we cram it in over a couple of days or all-nighters, and then the next morning nobody could talk to you because you don't want anything to slip out.
Exactly.
And and then you can't wait to take the test, and as soon as the test is done, the information disappears. So there's a difference.
By the way, that's why I passed college. I mean, that's how I got my MBA and everything. I had a great memory.
Yeah.
And then after it's over, I forgot everything.
Yeah. So there's a difference between, they call it the forgetting curve. The forgetting curve states that when somebody hears something or reads something or sees something once, within 2 days, 80% of it is gone. So there's a difference between cramming to forget and studying to remember. So there's a lot of strategies people could do to retain more, because what's the point of reading a book if we're going to not remember it a week from now?
Right.
One of the things is having better comprehension, right? So the focus. All right. So when people are reading, most people are feeding this incredible supercomputer one word at time. I can't even talk that slow because I'm from New York. But it's one of those things where, like, but if we spoke that slowly, what would your listeners do? They would tune out.
Right,
they
fall
would
asleep.
They would fall asleep. They would think about other things. But aren't those the same symptoms of when people experience mostly when they read? Their mind starts to wander. They fall asleep. Everything. And I'll tell you, it's because they're reading too slow. And it's interesting because if I ask most people to read faster, they'll say, I won't understand it. But again, we have a lot of data from people all around the world for 3 decades. We find that the faster readers actually have better comprehension and retention because they have better focus. Because it's similar to driving. If you're driving in this beautiful neighborhood, really kind of like going the speed limit, you could be doing a lot of different things because you're going relatively slow. Right. You could be drinking your coffee and checking on things, thinking about dry cleaning, whatever. But if you're racing a car, you're not thinking about the dry cleaning. You're not trying to text anybody, right? You're taking hairpin turns at like 180 miles an hour. You're completely focused on 2 things: what's in front of you and the act of driving. Right. And that's people who read faster and better. They're not distracted because they're. If you read too slow, your mind, your right brain, your imaginative brain will try to seek entertainment elsewhere in the form of distraction, because you're not giving. It's starving for stimulus. And if you don't give your brain the stimulus it needs, it'll mind wander somewhere else. And so what I was saying, one of the things that help you understand it better is to read it a little bit faster. And also, when you're reading it faster, you have better focus, right? And because you have better focus, you have better comprehension and retention. The other thing is, I teach people to use a visual pacer while they read. And we do a 1-hour free masterclass on, you could go to my Instagram, there's a link there. And you'll double your reading speed, which is substantial.
You will?
Yes, because the average person has processing information about 4 or 5 hours a day. You think about all the reports or research or emails or whatever you have to digest. Yeah. But even if you could just double your reading speed, which is very doable for every single person listening, that means you save 2 hours a day. what's 2 hours a day over the course of a year? I mean, even if you say 1 hour a day over the course of a year is 365 hours.
Yeah. It's
How
like
many,
a month, 2 months.
That's 40. Yeah. If it's a 40-hour work week, that's 9 weeks, 2 months.
Yeah.
Right. 2 months you get back just saving an hour a day and something ubiquitous like reading. Because reading is a skill. But the last time we upgraded that skill, how old were we? Like 6 years old?
Yeah,
when
we never
took
did. But like when we were a little kid, you'd read with your finger.
Yeah, and that's what we encourage people to do. One of the things that we teach is using a visual pacer. That if you use a highlighter, your finger, a pen,
Like
a
this?
mouse on a computer, yeah, and you're underlining it, right? And you don't actually have to ink it up, but if you're just kind of going right underneath the words, you'll read 25 to 50% faster just immediately. And I don't expect everyone to believe everything I'm saying.
So you just take your finger and go like this?
Yeah, and so what people could do is grab a book, right, and set a timer on your phone for 60 seconds. Mark where you start. Read for 60 seconds without your finger. Read how you normally read. When the alarm goes off, put a mark in the margin. Count the number of lines you just read, and then just underline using your finger. You don't have to touch the screen or the page, right? Because there's this friction, but just write, a little bit above it, and then do it for 60 seconds and count the number of lines. That second one, for the most part, will be about 25-50% lift, right away, in your speed and your focus. And if your focus is better, your comprehension is probably going to be better also.
Does it matter if you're reading honest? Because like, a lot of people are doing like books. Like
Kindles,
like
and
Kindle,
stuff like that.
yeah, Kindles and stuff versus a real book.
No, it'll work perfectly
The same
well.
way?
Yeah, just don't touch you don't have to touch the screen or swipe or anything. Just like right above it.
How about taking notes though? Like if I'm taking, that's the problem with audiobooks, by the way. So the funny thing is, years ago, when you wrote Limitless, was it 2020 when it first came out?
Yes.
I was on a road trip and I played it in my the audiobook.
Yeah.
And it was great. And like I said, when I got this again, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't remember anything. Like,
Yeah.
because the audio I never remember.
And you're not alone. So when people are tested, when they listen to something and they read it, reading will actually have better comprehension and better retention. Because usually when people are listening to something,
Yeah.
they're doing something else.
Totally, that's exactly
Right,
it.
and they're multitasking.
Yeah.
So I still listen in my car to podcasts and audiobooks also, but I'm not going to retain as much as if I'm reading. Because if I'm reading, so most people when they listen to this podcast, they're working out, right, or they're cleaning, or they're driving, or they're doing something. So they're not going to get as much as they could if they were just focused completely on listening to it.
You know what? I won't ever listen to something while I'm working out because then I do both things terribly.
Yeah.
I'm not working out as hard and I'm not retaining anything.
and that's the multitasking, because you're switching like your focus back and forth, and it can be exhausting also. Even people when they're working out,
Totally.
and you're at the gym, I see people all the time on social media and everything else, and no judgment, but I'm just saying if people aren't getting the results, it doesn't have to be the gym, but it could be anywhere. Then
Don't be upset about the results you don't
Yeah.
get from the work you haven't done.
you're so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. Well, you know why? Eric Thomas, you know who he is, right?
Yeah.
He always says that too.
Yeah.
And I love it. I use that line all the time.
But it's also so true. We put it in the book, and I tweeted about it years ago. But it's one of the things that sometimes we could complain, and I don't mind, people like not following anything that I'm saying, but it's hard when I hear people complain about stuff and they're
Totally.
not willing to try something new. In Limitless, there's a quote, not mine, from a French philosopher, and he says, "Life is the letter C between B and D. B is birth, D is death, life C, choice." That we always make these choices all the time, and so we could choose to do hard things, or we could choose just to like kind of do the easy things.
Totally.
Every single day we're presented with these choices.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a second. What is your morning routine? Because can you train your brain to be disciplined, or is that?
Oh yeah.
Because that's the other thing, right? Because you hear everyone says discipline, blah, 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 blah.
Oh yeah.
But if you don't have it, you don't have it.
Yeah. So I would say that. So my morning routine, it evolves. Also with your life cycles and everything else, and also your objectives. I mean, everybody has their morning routine, right? Tim Ferriss has his, Oprah has hers, everybody has their thing. For me, mine is really about getting my brain right. That's the most important thing. I'm very protective of it. So it is evolved. Sometimes it's where, I'll wake up and I'll do that ritual I mentioned. How do I make it a great day? 3 things personally, 3 things professionally. I tend to introduce the elements into my life. I know that in Babylonian times, ancient Greek times, they used to think everything was made of these four elements: air, water, fire, earth. And so I was just like, how do I get more of those elements into my life? So I'll wake up and I'll go outside and I will get grounded. I love just kind of walking barefoot in the yard. Because it just gives me a level of stability, and some people also suggest, the biohackers, that there's a wellness benefit also as well. So that's the earth.
Right.
I'll hydrate, first thing in the morning, because you can lose up to a pound of water when you're sleeping through respiration, perspiration, and being dehydrated, even just 2%, will throw off your cognitive performance. And staying hydrated, I had Dr. Lisa Mosconi, she's a neuroscientist and a nutritionist on, and she was saying staying hydrated will boost your reaction time, thinking speed, upwards of 30%. That's not a small lift, right?
Wow.
So I'll hydrate, usually with some electrolytes or some kind of structured water, but that's water. So I'll get earth, water, I'll get whatever sunlight's first thing in the morning to reset my circadian rhythm, which is so important for your sleep. Because your eyes are only part of your brain that's outside of your skull, and that's helped to reset your sleep patterns. And then, so that's fire, the sun,
Right.
and then air. I'll do some breathing, and it varies. Whether it's box breathing, Wim Hof breathing, alpha breathing, all these different breathing techniques. But it helps me to kind of get settled before I do anything, and it doesn't take a lot of time. Morning routines, I don't think have to take like 3 hours.
I mean, that's the problem. I mean, listen, some of these people who come on this podcast, I'm like, okay, your morning routine is basically, it's 5 o'clock already. It's 5 p.m.
Right.
Like, how are you getting anything else done? It's like, it's become like so, it's become
literally
ridiculous.
what I said is like 12 minutes of my morning, but then I'm clear and ready to go. And if there's other time to do other things, sometimes I'll even structure my day. I'm experimenting this past year with something different. I'll do 3 C's every day. Because remember I talked about the cognitive switching and how much energy it takes when you go from this to this to this?
Totally.
Sometimes I'll dedicate my workflow around 3 activities, so I don't have to switch. The morning for me is where I'm creative. I don't want input. I don't want to look at my phone. And I'm just giving an example of how I do
like
it.
this, yeah.
So everything is I want to output. So in the morning is when I write. I write every single day. It's just something I'll sketch out podcasts. I'll be creative before I input anything. I want to output. And then in the afternoon, I am more consuming. So I go from create to consume. And that's where I'm reading or I'm doing research, which I do a lot. Research for podcast guests and, future episodes, my next book, those kind of things. And in the evening, the third C, because I tend to alliterate, so I go create, consume, and then I clear. Meaning in the beginning, in the morning, I want to just take things out of my mind, right? I want to be creative. Consuming, I'm going to put it in, right? And then at night, I want to clear it because I don't want to be in my executive brain at night thinking about stuff.
Right.
So what will I do? I'll plan out my day the next, the night before. So that's like taking those ideas out so I don't have to think about them. Journaling, right? A form of any kind of meditation. That would be a form of clearing my mind.
So you'll meditate at night.
I'll meditate twice a day. And some people say, and only for about 15 minutes a day. I just feel like I'm at a disadvantage if I don't. And this, again,
Really?
this works for me. I just feel like most people don't take time to put some white space into their schedule. And for me, I've noticed a big lift when I do meditate as opposed to when I don't, because I think you have to disconnect to reconnect, right? Just like, like if a piece of technology is not working really well, what do? We just unplug it for a little bit. And then we plug it back in and it tends to reset. I think our brains aren't meant to go like, full speed for hours and hours. And so that's kind of my pit stop for 15 minutes. So I'll usually do it around 2 o'clock, like when you get a little bit of a lull to, kind of regenerate and recoup and recover. And then before I go to bed, I'll introduce the elements also, and I'll meditate and I'll do some yoga nidra. I have a little simple mantra and I don't meditate to become enlightened. It's actually very functional. Like you can't turn your mind off from thinking. Just any more than you could turn your heart off from beating, right? Your mind thinks just like your heart beats. But the idea here is at night, as part of my clearing process, I want to get, again, the fire, the water, the air, and the air part is the yoga nidra that helps me to kind of get in that parasympathetic rest and digest. But that's part of my clearing part.
I like that. I've never heard someone say it like that, because that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not a meditator.
Yeah.
I can't. I sit there and I'm like, because of but now I have a lot of anxiety around meditation, because everyone says you have to meditate. So
Yeah.
then I sit there, I'm like, why can't I do this? It brings a lot of rumination and loops.
Yeah, and one of the things is people have a misconception again that they have to just quiet their mind.
Yeah.
You don't. I've interviewed many meditators that have been doing it for decades, and they are instructors. Again, that chatter is there, but what I do is I use it as an exercise of the mind, meaning that when my focus goes somewhere, which it invariably will, when I bring
Right.
it back to a breath or I bring it back to a word, I'm exercising my focus
Right.
and my mindfulness, and that shows up. I truly believe how you do anything is how you do everything, that saying.
Yeah.
And so that when I'm doing that, it helps me later, the next morning or when I'm interacting with people, I can bring my focus back when I get distracted by
Right.
something that's going on in the world
Or the whiteboard is, I like the way you said that, because it's like you're recharging, so you're not just go 24
Yeah.
hours. It's forcing you. You're basically scheduling time
Yeah.
to actually like think or just be.
Yeah, or
Versus-
because I think one of the most important productivity tools we have is our calendar, and you'll schedule PTA meetings for the kids or doctor's appointments or podcast interviews, but we don't always schedule like our own self-care. We don't usually schedule like our own personal growth, even scheduling the things you learn from here. Okay, so like as a coach, I have to call people on their stuff. A lot of people are addicted to just listening to stuff, and that's great, but our lives aren't changed by just more knowledge. Our lives changed by applying that knowledge. So I have a belief that for every hour you spend listening to a podcast like this, you should dedicate an hour to putting it into practice. That's why I say take notes and then ask yourself, how can I use this? Why must I use this? When am I going to do it? And
Totally
schedule
true.
it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like somebody who reads a book and even understands it, but if they're not implementing it, they're no better off than someone who's illiterate, right?
I totally
Functionally
agree.
in their life. So I just feel like I want to encourage everybody to just the truth is none of the podcast courses, lectures work unless you work it.
That's exactly true. And to your point, I think people are professional book buyers, and they buy the books and they take the courses, or they just sit on the shelf and they don't even basically read. They read a little bit or they don't apply it. If you're not applying anything, it doesn't matter what information. Like, I think what's happened a lot now, everyone has a lot of information.
Yeah.
Too much information, but no one's doing anything with the information because it's confusing too. Like, people are overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, how do we? Is there a way you can help us? How do we automate certain things in our lives to free up more brain space?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are right. You're right. Because so we talked about digital dementia, which is outsourcing your memory, and our memory gets weaker. We talked about digital distraction, with all the rings, pings, dings, making us distracted throughout the day. We can't concentrate. There's also this thing I term digital deluge. And the healthcare term is information anxiety. There's just too much. It's like taking a sip of water out of a fire hose, right? And that causes real health effects. That's why we do so much corporate training, because the teams are inundated with information. It creates higher blood pressure, compression of leisure time, more sleeplessness and rumination, all that. And that's why we teach people how to learn faster, because if the amount of information is doubling at dizzying speeds, it's just getting higher and higher. But how we read it and absorb it and understand it, retain it, it's the same. That growing gap creates that stress, that information overload. And so I would say that some people feel burnt out because they're doing too much. I also think that we feel burnt out not because we do so much. Sometimes we're doing too little of the things that make us come alive, and so I would do a little spot check with a filtering system in terms of what's really important here. Because I'm always obsessed about the analogy of the lead domino. Like, what's the domino that you could hit that could, take care of all these other dominoes, the 80-20 rule. What's the 20% of my efforts that are going to be 80% of the rewards? Because there's always that focal point that's a force multiplier. So I want to get really good at the things that have the return, because I don't want to have FOMO. If anything, I have a joy of missing out a lot of the times just because I like my space and and just my own sanity. But I would say learn how to learn to keep up with all the things that are important to you. We live in the expert economy, right? Like right now, people might want to be an expert in their field, but that requires us to constantly be updating our knowledge, but also having good skills to read, to remember, to focus.
Yeah. So how about food wise? Like what are some
Yeah.
food, I mean, not the ones we always, blueberry, salmon, fat, all that.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can tell us that are different foods that would help really boost our brain power, our memory?
Yeah.
What do you eat? Like what is your daily diet?
Yeah, and it fluctuates, especially if I'm traveling and I'm on the like on like book tour right now, so I can't
Right.
easily make. I would always prefer our family likes to make our meals. That's always preferable because I like working with ingredients that I just know what they are.
Totally.
Sometimes when we're in a restaurant, unless I'm going to like Air One or someplace where I feel like they have it dialed in, because you don't know like what seed oils and everything else that they're cooking
Right.
with.
Exactly. 100%. Like
all
yeah.
of that, and it's again like I'm not a dietitian, nutritionist, or a medical doctor, but I just encourage people to have self-awareness, meaning like when you're eating something, just notice how it feels. So it's not just what we eat, and we know all the brain foods, the wild salmon and the sardines and the avocados and the brain berries and all that,
Right.
but also it's an emphasis on how you're eating it. I see so many people at these things kind of gobbling down food really fast or doing it while they're doing work. And you have to get in that parasympathetic rest and digest in order to really assimilate that food. And some people are so stressed with their diet, it almost, I would imagine, counteracts,
So
some of the benefit of what they're eating. So I would just remind people, regardless of what it is, and people could search, my name and the best brain foods and show you how to memorize them and all that fun stuff. But it's also, I want to remind you, it's not just what you eat, it's how you eat and also who you're eating with. Like a lot of these studies that are done with long, living cultures, they also have a lot of like family meals together because it's a social connection. And then I think that's understated, and it's also a kind of a dying routine in a lot of family units. And if it's not family, because when I lived between New York City and LA for the past 10 years, going back and forth. When I came out here, I didn't know anybody, so we'd have the Friendsgivings, right? I would host, and every city I go to, I tend to host like a gathering. And we have this ritual of putting the phones away, or we'll stack the phones in the corner, and whoever grabs their phone first has to pay for the the meal or something like that.
That's a good one.
But even having the phone there creates anxiety, this unconscious anxiety. That's why I don't keep my phone by my nightstand, because research has shown even the presence of the phone, even if it's on airplane mode or turn off, it makes you feel, because you're so used to doing this all, like typing
Right.
on it all the time and swiping on it, you have the urge to grab it.
Right.
So even if it's off in your sleep, you feel it could create anxiety just being there, even at the dining table also as well. So we can be distracted or feeling the impulse to doing that. And
Right.
again, technology is a great tool to use, but if the technology is using you, then we become the tool. And
Yeah.
that doesn't even make any sense to me. And so I would say, this socializing and using this time and having questions, of family members or friends, that's not just, the typical small talk, like how was school today? Good, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's just like, what did you learn? What did you learn today? What are you proud of, today? Who did you help? Like questions that go a little bit deeper. But I also, again, you could have that great brain food, everything else, but then you have that social connection, because that's so important for the brain, right? Especially living in a world,
I totally
people
agree.
loneliness and just not feeling heard or understood, and especially when you don't have all the time in the world to spend with the people that you care about, right? So it's about going back to the Clinton and just being present with them, and so it's not about the amount of hours. I feel it's more the quality of the time that we spend.
Are you able to even train people one-on-one, like with your schedule now?
I think we've trained a handful of overlap clients. I'm doing it less and less the past 5 years, just because of leverage. That's why I'm writing these books, and I'm especially proud of the new book, because I could put my latest research there, and it could go out to lots more people. That's why I put my energy into the podcast. We have the largest academy of accelerated learning in the world online, but that scales, but occasionally I do, we do have a wait list for that. Are you doing a lot of personals?
No,
anymore?
no. I don't have. Now I work with a lot of people. Like I do company advisory stuff, and
Yeah.
we do a lot of like high performance stuff. But I just, it's hard to do all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, growing up labeled, the boy with the broken brain, I want to build better, brighter brains, and really no brain left behind. Like my dream
Right.
would be like to positively impact 1 billion brains, but I can't do that on a one-on-one or even classroom
You can't do that.
setting, so.
But don't limit yourself. Maybe you can.
No, but
don't put that
on scale though, online,
exactly.
or like all this, or VR, everything else that's out there, I could reach more people.
You put a quiz on. I did the quiz yesterday night. It's
Yeah.
like, hold on, it's called where is it? What do you guys call it?
mybrainanimal.com.
My Brain Animal.
Yeah, so I realized this is something so this book, it really is about the fourth M, which is momentum. It has all of the gems from the previous book that came out a few years ago, but I realized that post-pandemic AI world, and being a new father, that I have a deeper, renewed sense of commitment that people are prepared. I think some things we can only learn in a storm, and some storms come because they clear our path. But there's been a lot of storms in our lives the past few years, and I'm sure a lot of people could relate. But going back to the power of choice, I truly believe that these difficult times, they could diminish you, or these difficult times can distract you, or these difficult times, they can develop you.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we decide. And so the theme of this new book is about momentum. Once you unlimit your mindset, your motivation, your methods, then you could create this incredible momentum. And then we added all these new chapters on how you could sustain momentum and accelerate momentum. And so everything from nootropics, which is a big. We talk about some of the supplements that can help you focus, improve your mood. We talk about AI in there, how to use AI to improve your HI, your human intelligence, and different ways you can use it.
Can you tell us some? Give us a tip of how you
yeah.
use it, because that's another way your brain's getting lazy, I thought. Because
Yeah, and
AI is doing everything.
Yeah, so for me, AI is not artificial intelligence as much. The way I perceive it is augmented intelligence. Just like any kind of technology, it's meant to support you, right?
Yeah.
And to potentially serve you and advise you. And it's not always right, by any stretch, but it could offer a good, it could be a good writing partner, a creative partner, a reading partner, and so on. So simple examples, our whole team uses AI in some respects, not solely on it, but so like to learn faster, right? Every principle in Limitless can be applied into an AI like ChatGPT. So if I wanted to, let's say somebody wanted to learn about neuroplasticity, you could put a prompt in there saying, explain neuroplasticity to me as if I'm 8 years old, right? And that will give you a good foundation. Sometimes when I'm doing a podcast and the book doesn't arrive in time, I generally don't want to read digital, because I don't need another excuse to be on a screen,
Right.
personally. And I read, the books of all our guests, because I'm a very fast reader.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't get the book mailed in time, or it gets lost, and I'll go online and I'll say, into an AI platform, I'll say, provide a good book summary, and then I'll put in even the expert in and say, what are some thoughtful questions that they haven't been asked before, specifically for our audience, right? And I'll define that audience, and and I won't always use everything, but
That's so good.
it'll spark something that it was just like, wow. Or I'll say, I talk about mind mapping in the book, a very effective whole brain note-taking technique. And I'll say, hey, mind map this subject for me, and it'll provide, a structure for me to build notes on. Or, one of the strategies I use is a memory palace. Which is taking certain locations that you're very familiar with, like your body or your kitchen or something, and putting the key ideas in those different locations. So you could give a speech without notes or remember facts or something like that. And I'll say, hey, take this data that I'm inputting with you and build a memory palace, for it. And I'll still have to do the work. I think that more than ever, because of AI, it helps to be like, brain literate, right? And really know how your brain works. Because once you understand how your brain works, you could work your brain. It's the equivalent of being
100%.
physically fit.
I totally agree.
You don't want, just because we have all this great technology that could take us places and do all these things, you don't want to get, you don't want flabby muscles, but you definitely don't want mentally flabby muscles.
No, but you said something that I wanted you just to kind of elaborate a little bit on, that memory palace.
Yeah.
Right? So like, for an example, like keynote speaking, right? You do a
Yeah.
ton of it. I get asked to do them. They're like 45 minutes or an hour, and I like freak out because I'm like, how am I going to memorize all of this without staring at my notes, right?
Yeah.
How would you suggest someone like that? Because I know other people have that same type of presentation when they have to make presentations.
It's one of the biggest fears in the world is
right, public speaking.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
More it's first. I think like death is like number 3 or something.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's a big one. And I think the big fear underlining it is that we aren't going to be able to perform. And it's self-reinforcing because the more nervous and fearful you are, you're not going to remember because of that. When you're in fight or flight, and cortisol and adrenaline's running out, like it literally what it's doing is it's like holding your survivor brain's holding you hostage from your executive functioning, from your prefrontal cortex, from making good decisions and everything, from your memory. Chronic stress has been shown to shrink your brain. So it's So first,
stress does actually chronic
stress has been shown to shrink the human brain. Yeah. Chronic fear, by the way, actually suppresses your immune system. So the whole area of science called psychoneuroimmunology makes you more susceptible to colds, to flus, to viruses, which is and that's challenging because that's when you turn on the television, it's all fear-based, right? And so, just like there's an algorithm to social media, whatever you engage with, they show you more of that thing. So is with your mind. So if you're always looking at what's threatening and what's harmful and what could hurt us, then you're going to start seeing that's your algorithm. So you start seeing that same stuff everywhere, so you have to be very careful to stand guard, at the doors of
what you're putting into your brain.
Yeah. Not just your body, but exactly your brain. So going through it, down the street, there's a film studio, fairly famous and large one. And I would go there on a regular, helping their actors speed read scripts, memorize their lines, and be focused on set.
Beyond just taking their finger and going la 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 la.
Yeah, there's simple tips that we could do really short in podcast format. But I would include if people go. I would create jimkwik.com/more. One of the things is KWIK. There's a master class on reading. You should take it.
I know, I'm going to.
It's pick any book that you have to read, and at 60 minutes I walk you through some of these things, a tutorial and smart reading strategy. So even if you're not reading it faster, you're speed reading, you're reading it smarter. So you're going to retain more and everything. But going back to remembering scripts, there are lots of different ways that we talk about in the book. One of them is when you're going through a script, it depends if you have to do it verbatim, right? So there's some things that you just want to know key points. Mm-hmm. So I work off of mostly key points because I don't want it to be so scripted, right? But sometimes as a TED Talk, they really, when I'm prepping TED speakers, they want to get it almost verbatim. Actors certainly also as well.
Say the TED Talk verbatim, which is very stressful. But even for a keynote, how you don't...
Yeah, for me, the keynote, I'll give a keynote and I'll just think, hey, these are the 10 points I want to teach, right? And what I'll do is I'll build a memory palace, which means I'll stand mentally in my mind, everyone can do this with me, stand into the doorway of your home. Not the hallway or a mud room, but just the first room. And as you look around, you see a lot of stuff. And you're thinking, well, I should have cleaned before I did this exercise. Yeah. But what I do is I just go around clockwise in this room. Let's say I'm in the kitchen. I'll go around clockwise and I'll pick 5 places going clockwise. So in my case, I see the microwave. I see the stovetop. The third place is the refrigerator. The dishwasher is the 4th. And let's say the sink is the 5th, right? And then I'll go into an adjacent room and duplicate that again. And I'll do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And then that's the place. So this is a 2,500-year-old memory technique developed in ancient Greece. Orators and poets would use it to memorize things. They realize you remember things based on where they are. Even when you forget someone's name, you ask yourself, where do I know that person from? Mm-hmm. Because the context will often give you the content, right? And so then the second part is you take what you want to remember and you turn it into a reminder picture. Because we already talked about you think in images. So let's say you want to teach people the 10 keys for a limitless brain. And my first one is a good brain diet. So I would put all those brain foods in the first place, which happened to be the microwave, right? And then the second place is a stovetop. And the second key to a limitless brain is killing ants. Killing ants is actually good for your brain. Ants are automatic negative thoughts, right? And so I would imagine in my stovetop, I'm roasting ants there. And it's for a split second. I would never do that, but in my mind, it's kind of like, ooh. And then the refrigerator is exercise. So if I wanted, the third point I want to remember is to exercise, I open the refrigerator up and then bam, Pilates, CrossFit, whatever's going on
Whatever
inside
it is,
there.
yeah.
And then even when I did this, said it out loud, even people can remember what was in the microwave, the good brain foods, what was on the stovetop. We were killing ants. You know, what happens in the refrigerator? Oh, people are exercising.
Should we always
it gives
use the
you
kitchen?
points. No, I could go into any room in my home. You could go into homes that you've lived in before. You could go into the mall. You could use your body. You know, up and take people, top brain foods in the top of your head. You could have the avocados using it as hair conditioner. You could have blueberries coming out of your nose. Broccoli is a great brain food. You know, vitamin K help with potentially BDNF. You're right in your teeth, right? So it's like you do that, and then you go to the store, because sometimes people go to the store to buy one thing and they come back with 2 grocery bags full of things.
Yes.
Except for that thing
That's what happens to me daily. Yes.
Yeah, but but all these exercises, even when they don't work, they work because it gets you to focus, in a way, and that focus leads to the memory.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so good. Okay, I feel like I've asked you a lot of questions, and you've been so gracious in giving people such great actionable things. Guys, you got to do the brain test, because
Yes.
I'm a cheetah.
This is a big one.
Yeah.
And people get this gift. It's at mybrainanimal.com. You'll see it's a memory code, CODE.
And it's free.
Yes, and the C is the cheetah. Are you a fast-acting cheetah? So yourself, you really thrive in fast-paced environments. You quickly adapt. You have strong intuition. The O is the logical owl. And nobody's any one. There's a primary, a secondary. We're all mixed. But just like, if you're right-handed, it doesn't mean you don't use your left hand. It's just that's how you prefer.
Exactly.
Well, your cognitive type will tell you how you think, how you read, how you focus, and then I give everybody a detailed, literally, how there's like personalized medicine or nutrition.
Yeah,
this is like
absolutely.
personalized learning. So you get detailed strategies based on your brain animal on how to negotiate and how to hire and how do you read faster and improve your focus based on your animal. The D is the visionary dolphins. These are people who are great problem solvers. They're great pattern recognizers, a very strong imagination. And then finally the E are the elephants. And these are your collaborators. They love working in teams. They have high empathy and interpersonal skills. And even if you look at anything, like it's in popular culture. Like if you take Harry Potter, I would say Harry is your cheetah, right? Hermione is the logical owl, if you're familiar with this. Or you could take anything. You could take Billions or whatever thing. There's always these characters that are there.
Yeah. What are you?
So for me, I'm strong owl and elephant. I'm very just logical. I like to do all the research, everything, but then also elephant, high empathy. I rated high because I guess struggling as a kid for so long, watching everybody else, I could kind of detect suffering and it motivates me to do a lot. And hopefully it makes me a good teacher because I could remember what it feels like to be stressed or fearful or doubtful, and hopefully I could serve people because of it.
No, I love your work. And guys, the book is Limitless, and now with more information. I can't even imagine that book with even more.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's dense, and it's really easy to read. Fun stories. It's like an owner's manual for your mind, your number one wealth building asset. People could go to limitlessbook.com, and there's all these bonuses as a thank you. We donate all the proceeds to charity.
You do?
Last book we donated over $1 million to build schools. We built schools in Ghana, Guatemala, Kenya, Alzheimer's research for women. In memory of my grandmother. Women are twice as likely to experience Alzheimer's than men, yet most of the research is done on men and treatments on men.
I don't understand that.
Yeah, so I subscribe, but you learn to earn to be able to return. This is our way to be giving back. So just know that when you support this book or you gift it to people, that you get your education, but children will get their education. You get a better brain by going through this book, but so does research for other people who really need it. But I'm very passionate about children and the aging population because of my personal experience as a child with my brain injury and then losing, loved ones to dementia. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Jim. And
thank you. Can I challenge everyone to do something?
Yeah, absolutely.
I challenge everybody, remember the knowledge is not power, it's potential power. It becomes power when we utilize it. I would challenge everyone just to take a screenshot of this, wherever they're consuming this right now, whatever platform, and then tag us both, and then share one thing you're going to do to have your, a better brain. And because you'll tag us, I'll see it and I'll repost, some of my favorites, and I'll gift out, a handful of copies to your community.
That's
just
amazing.
as a thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's amazing. When is this actually available?
November 14th.
November 14th. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't ask one question. Just say it really quickly. What are the supplements that you take for your brain?
So the supplements and nootropics are a little bit different. Supplements, I'm looking at the ones that really affect the brain, vitamin D,
Yeah.
omega-3s, DHAs. I'm a big fan of creatine, like not just for exercise, but for cognitive health and performance. It's like, yeah, that's a must for me. I would say for nootropics, I mean, people test it. Again, find something, do your own research. Lion's mane it works well. Bacopa is good. Alpha GPC. There's a lot of things that people can look into.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, caffeine. I'm not a huge coffee drinker, but there's definitely a lift. Research shows in terms of focus and cognitive energy, which could be good. But there's so many different things.
There's so many.
We have a comprehensive list, about 24
of stuff. I just wanted to get your quick little.
Yeah, and with all of them have human studies and everything. They're all referenced because kind of geek out like that.
No, I love that. Thank you so much, Jim. I'm so happy to have you on here. Thank you
so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.